Hi everyone, welcome to my studio. It's artist Elizabeth Whelan here to talk today about botanical drawing. So here are some examples I just laid out of sketches I had done over the years, and they're very casual. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, is how to go about doing botanical drawing in a way that's fun and interesting for you. And I'm going to lead you through some examples that I found and also talk a little bit about technique. So let's get started. So some of my favorite materials to use are listed here. Faber-Castell drawing pencils or something similar, basically arranged from hard to soft. A mechanical pencil, Prismacolor ebony pencils. Now, the reason I like these so much is because they have quite a range from light to dark. A kneaded rubber eraser, Canson drawing paper, General's white charcoal pencils, and then different types of colored pencils, and I just happen to like Prismacolor quite a bit. Fabriano Artistico watercolor paper is just really wonderful to draw on. And if you like paints, gouache or watercolor paints are wonderful for botanical illustration and drawing, and so is pen and ink. So you can find most of these supplies online. I use Dick Blick, Jerry's Artorama, Cheap Joe's. There are quite a few different websites you can go to get supplies like this. So here we have an example of what people typically think of when they think of botanical drawing. Usually what they're thinking of is this kind of botanical illustration that has a great deal of detail, a very scientific approach. And this is wonderful, and I certainly don't want you to discourage you from trying it. It's a fantastic idea, beautiful designed layout with a real detail of every part of the lifespan of the plant, which is one way to go about drawing botanical subject matter. Here's another one where the plant is shown in such a way that you can see all the different stages of growth and some little details at the bottom. These are just really beautiful. Here's another way to do one where you take a plant, show all the different parts, and actually label them. And another completely different way to go about sketching is what most of us do when we go outside. This is a sketch I found online. Unfortunately, I don't know who the artist is, but I really liked it. It has so much life. It was obviously done in a few minutes, but it really does show how the plant works and its form. I think it's great. And another sketch, also a little bit stylized, showing some of that detail, and just really a nice layout on the page. And this person did a drawing in pencil, but tried to emulate those more formal botanical illustrations. And this is just beautifully done. I also like this approach where the entire surroundings of the plant was drawn out, but detail was only put in certain parts. So here we are back to the more formal beautifully illustrated piece. And I'll tell you honestly, as an artist, I love this sort of thing, and it takes hours and hours to do this. So if you're thinking, oh, I'm going to go outside and do some botanical sketching, it's not that simple. Not only that, but digging up a plant like a dandelion is a little bit difficult. You can sort of see here that the root is quite long. And so taking an object like this and then trying to make one drawing out of it is rather difficult. So what artists tend to do when they're doing botanical drawing is to either take parts or observe the plant as a whole, perhaps look at it over different days or weeks, depending on how quickly the plant matures, perhaps dig a little bit up as well, and then create sort of a design from that. Just like this person did. This is just a nice layout. And I really like this as well, with a little bit of information. And of course, this particular drawing isn't done in quite such a scientific manner, but this is this particular artist's style, the way they like to draw. And this is what I would recommend that you try, is to infuse your botanical drawing with your own take on things. This is another lovely way to go about a drawing. We continue with the dandelion theme. I really like the way that there's just a little bit of detail put into the ends there, enough to tell you what's going on, and the rest of it is done with pencil. So here's a sketch I really liked. If you read it in the upper right-hand corner, this person said, I just ran out of time to finish. I had to go eat dinner, but in a way, I kind of like it like this. And it's really true. If you have an hour or so to do a drawing, this is probably as far as you will get. It takes a long time to do those really detailed, days in fact, to do those really detailed pieces. So being realistic about what you can accomplish when you're botanical drawing is important as well. So this is what happens when you go outside and you decide you're going to do a botanical drawing. You've just seen all those beautiful plates with everything laid out so clearly, so well defined. And what happens is you come across a dandelion in the grass, and this is what it looks like. It's really difficult to separate this out from all the greenery around it. What I have found to be useful is sometimes having a couple of pieces of small cardboard or something like that that I can lay around the bottom of a plant, just so I can see what the heck is going on and separate it out from everything around it. I do try not to pick the plant if I possibly can help it, because bringing it inside to the studio takes it out of its natural environment, and you don't really get to see how it grows from the ground up. At the same time, they usually fade quite quickly. So if you really want to be able to take some time and really watch what a plant does, looking at it outside is the best way to go about it. So if you're out there in the wilds and you come across something you would like to draw, for example, this trillium. When I was a kid and living in Ontario, we thought that it was illegal to pick trilliums. That was sort of an urban legend. And so we would definitely, if we saw something like this, wouldn't even think about bringing it home. As it is, the trillium is a really delicate flower, and it is highly recommended not to pick or try to dig them up, because if you take one, you're likely to destroy the entire group of them, because they are joined by their root structure in a really fragile manner. So if you came across a trillium and you wanted to draw it, and it's a lovely shape, this is what you would want to do. First of all, you're sitting out there in the wilds, and you need to figure out how to draw these proportions. And so this orange line that you see here represents a pencil. So what I do with my pencil or pen, and I'm actually going to grab a paintbrush because I do the same thing with a paintbrush, is I actually hold that hold that paintbrush up and check that angle that I'm seeing. And in this case, I would pick a couple of points to start and go, okay, where's the top of that petal and the top of that little extra leaf? Let me mark a couple of points on my paper, and then without moving the angle, I would go down to my page. I would sort of see where that angle should be and make a couple of notes how that would look. And then from that, I can then check other angles as well. So in this particular case, I'm looking over here and I'm saying, okay, I would like to know where the side point and the end point of those two petals are. And once again, I would then bring my pencil over and go, okay, my mark should be about here. And this is how I check angles on all sorts of things, not just on plants, but on people when I'm drawing portraits, on still lifes, landscapes, all sorts of things. If you're drawing away without doing this, and your drawing looks like it's getting a little wonky and something you're not quite sure what's happening, a good way to check if how your measurements are going and how one object or one part of the object relates to another is to use this method of checking angles. So here again, checking along the top once you have the side, checking the other side. In this case, where does the stem actually come up? It's not quite in the middle, so you can kind of make a note of how that goes. And likewise, if your leaves are looking too big or not quite in the same place, you can use check the angle with your pencil, bring the pencil down to the page, and see if you need to make any corrections. All right, so back to this, the dandelion. What I'd like you to do if you have an opportunity and you have your sketchbook or a piece of paper at hand is go ahead and pause this video and try to sketch this particular dandelion plant. And you can do it in detail or you can do it really roughly, but use your idea of drawing angles to put all the objects in the right place, to put the dandelions themselves, the unopened or dead dandelions, and the roots basically where they need to be according to what you see. It's really good practice. And here's another image that's a good one to pause on for a few minutes and try to draw. One of the things I would strongly suggest doing when you're botanical drawing or any kind of drawing is editing, and that means editing what you see. So sometimes that includes doing a quick little sketch off to the side, which is a sort of a note to yourself about what your plan is. What are you planning on doing? Where are the darks and the lights? In this particular case, I might decide I want to draw all 5 of the dandelion heads because there's a nice design to that. But do I need all of those leaves? And so this little sketch that I do up in the corner might help indicate which leaves are the most important, which ones do I actually need to draw. So if you have some time, go ahead and pause this right here and do a quick sketch, because this is the kind of thing you're going to encounter in nature. And to give you an idea of how long it takes to draw something, this was a 10-minute sketch that I did based on a photograph that I'll show you in just a minute. And so I'm drawing it rather large, but it's very rough. I've made a few indications of the type of color and what I can see, with the idea that if this was all I was able to do, I could probably paint something from this. I've made some notes. I've said the petals are swirling, they're golden ochre, they're kind of a brownish color in the shadows, and so on. So that if I were to actually try to do something in watercolor later and didn't have color reference, I could go ahead and do that. Now, you can take photos with your phone, but most people find that the photos that they take when they get home of plants in particular really don't do justice to the variation of color and really the sense of 3 dimension that flower occupies. So notes of your own will help jog your memory as to what you actually saw. So this was me working from one of these drawings here. I think it was the one in the top row in the middle. And if you have a chance to stop for just a few minutes and pause this and maybe pick 1 or 2 of these views of the dandelion, it takes a little bit longer than you might think to do a sketch. Use angles to check where all those little bits are coming out, and then also decide when it comes to doing, for example, the full open flower or the full open dandelion clock, how much detail do you actually need to include to get the right idea across about what it is that you're drawing. Now, when you do take photos or when you are out looking at plants, I would highly recommend not just standing over them and taking pictures, but get right down there like this photographer did, right down there at plant level, and look across the underneath of the plant and see what's going on under there. It really, to begin with, if you're doing a more formal botanical illustration or drawing, it will really make it more interesting to be able to see that information. But it'll also help you figure out when you are drawing just what the little parts are that you're seeing and how the stem connects to the flower top. So here's a hint also, if you're working in color. You might have done some work in black and white in pencil or pen and ink, and you'd like to do some colored pencil or some watercolor or something of that sort. When I'm working in colored pencil, which is one of the ways I really love to do botanical drawing, I'll go ahead and do a really light sketch of whatever I'm up to. In this case, it was basil leaves. And I'll do a little bit of detail, but not an awful lot in pencil. And then I'll come in with both an indigo blue and a Tuscan red and do the shading, the shadows that I see in those 2 colors. I'll do most of the shading in the blue and I'll do less shading in the red if I'm working in something green. In other words, I'm using complementary colors to help build sort of a tonal variation underneath the other colors of green that I'll put on top. Because you might have tried to do pencil drawing, colored pencil drawing, using greens, for plants, and just not really been able to get that definition or the darks and lights that you were after. The dark green colored pencil really isn't that dark. So if you put some reds in the darkest spots and some blues in the second darkest spots underneath those layers of green, I think you'll find that your colored pencil drawing will be more successful. So here's where I had the layer of red that I put down first. And as you can see, I still have a little bit of pencil that I did up at the top there. And then I came over the top of that red and added even more shading, but this case in the blue. And The other little trick that I do, so to speak, and I'll do this with painting, the same sort of idea, is if I know there have to be highlights, in this particular case on the basil, there are some very bright yellow greens on the bumpy areas where the light is caught on the leaf. So I went in and used yellow to indicate those right now so that I know when I go ahead and draw over all of this with the different greens that I really will get that sense of a little bit of a shine or a little bit of yellow green in these areas. It allows me a lot more control to put this in as a separate layer by itself. So you can see up in the upper middle how that worked out and how much dimension I was able to get into that drawing by using the indigo blue and the Tuscan red underneath and also pulling out my highlights pretty early on. Now this iris, the yellow iris that you see below it, that was a lot more difficult to do because all of those yellows, trying to show some sort of differentiation in those is very difficult. So I followed the same idea. I have some I used a really light touch and a very sharp pencil, and I put Tuscan red and a little bit of that indigo blue underneath the layers. And I probably used some other colors as well, a little bit of orange and gold and that kind of thing. So that there was a little bit of tonality and some different color variation, even though all the color was really quite uniform. And so here you see on the right and left a couple of drawings that I did, just really casual ones done with pencils. And I did them on toned Canson paper using charcoal, white charcoal pencil as highlight. So botanical drawing and painting can lead you in lots of different directions. You can be doing a botanical illustration where you show all the various different stages of a particular plant. You can do an ornate painting, such as this one right here, where all of these fabulous plants are shown together in really a really lush arrangement. Or something like this by Van Gogh. Even though his style is very impressionistic and rather loose. It's very much his style. He also, though, took time to really observe how these irises grew and how these various different, the shades of color in the leaves and the flatness of them, just really wonderful. And even his sunflowers are all extremely different. And let me tell you, if you've ever tried to paint or draw sunflowers, they're not quite as easy as you might think. Trying to figure out what to do with all those yellows and how to show that kind of brownish green color in the center, depending on what type of sunflower it is a real challenge. So if you're working on dandelions, I would say sunflowers are your next challenge. Here's a painting I did a while ago where I wanted to show an artichoke flower getting ready to open, and also another flower that kind of unrolls itself called Phacelia, which the bees really love. And even though I don't have a ton of detail, this is a small painting about 9 by 12, I really did take the time to do some preliminary drawings and really observe how these plants were built and how they work as they unroll or open, and try to reflect that in the painting itself. Likewise with these Brussels sprouts. These were growing in the garden with a kind of a golden straw underneath them, and I liked the way that came across in the background. So although this is realistic in a sense, it isn't really a botanical illustration in the sense of a scientific illustration, but it does show the form, and I am showing details from the plants. So you can decide yourself just how much you include. Likewise, another painting I did that shows honeysuckle, the winter honeysuckle vines, because I really liked the way those turned around. The painting is called Dead or Alive because there's a life and an activity to it, even though this was the middle of winter. So using your powers of observation to really pick up the details of plants, no matter how you're actually putting them in a painting or drawing, can really add some dimension to the work. I loved these cherry tomatoes growing. This is another small painting. These cherry tomatoes are growing within a cage, and I liked just the color and the way the light came through them. And yet everything didn't have to be super detailed. Apart from the cherry tomatoes themselves, the background is quite impressionistic. And here was a bouquet I made of kale and Swiss chard, and let's see, Diablo Cosmos are in there. I think actually a couple of types of kale. But it was a lot of fun to do something that was a botanical drawing, so to speak, or botanical painting that wasn't really the traditional, just bunch of flowers. Also, when you're drawing trees or painting trees, the same sort of rules apply. Really observing how those plants work, how they grow, in this case, how they're deteriorating, how the branches come out, and using your pencil or paintbrush to measure the angles to really get a sense of what is actually happening out there in the real world. If we bring those specimens into our house, although you couldn't bring these trees in, but you know what I mean. If you bring specimens into your house to work on, sometimes that can be helpful in the sense that I brought home a couple of small branches and twigs from these trees to get the right feel and color of the actual bark. But in general, painting outdoors is a wonderful experience, and it allows you to actually get a sense of the environment that these plants live in. So whether you're sketching in a very detailed black and white sense or doing something loose in your sketchbook, this artist has a very simple and really basic, wonderful approach, very clean approach to their sketching with notes. Here's one that's a bit more detailed that another artist did. And then back again to these botanical illustrations. There is nothing wrong with taking the layout from one of these vintage botanical illustrations and doing your own drawing or illustration using the same kind of layout. Here's another one, similarly done. In this case, only the main object is in color and the others are in black and white. So you can definitely use artwork that was done by artists that came before you as a jumping off point for your own work. And here's an exercise I'd really like you to consider. It's wonderful to go out in nature and really observe how plants and trees grow from the seed all the way on, watching the changes through the seasons. In this particular case right here, I've got 4 pictures of a zinnia plant that I took during the course of a year. And really, aren't those amazing? I mean, you start off with just a few leaves, things get more and more complex, watching those buds open, and then the final plant. That's really a challenge to draw by the time you get to the end. Just spending some time watching nature at work is fantastic. Botanical drawing is a really great way to experience the world around us. So whether you're doing a detailed botanical illustration or just some quick sketching in a sketchbook, it's so much fun. I hope you give it a try. And here's some books that I'm recommending. So I don't know when you are actually watching this video, there may be quite a few more books out there, but these are just 3 that I came across that I really like. Botanical Drawing Using Graphite and Colored Pencils by Sue Vise, Botanical Portraits with Colored Pencils by Anne Swan, and The Law's Guide to Nature Drawing and Journaling, which is quite a different take. The first 2 are, I'd say, a little bit more formal way to go about approaching drawing. Really beautiful drawings and examples in both of those. And then John Law's is much more about the nature drawing actually out in nature, you know, sitting on a rock and trying to draw something. And in there you'll also find guides to drawing birds and things like that. So different types of books, look them up, see what you like. I hope you have a great time sketching and doing botanical drawing. See you next time.